Chapter 1702. At this time, only Auntie Fong would insist on cleaning the unconscious Chen Biue every day. She would open the doors and windows regularly to ventilate and tidy the room. On this day, when Auntie Fong opened the window in the morning, a gust of cold wind suddenly brushed past her body. Auntie Fong couldn't help but shiver. She looked up at the sky strangely. It was supposed to be a sunny day, wasn't it? Worried that the cold wind would catch the young master cold, Auntie Fong stood by the window for a while. After confirming that the cold wind was just a coincidence, she left the window. Walking to the bedside, Auntie Fong looked at the handsome man on the bed who looked a little pale because of being bedridden for a long time and sighed. "Young master, you have to hurry and come over. Even an old woman like me can feel that the atmosphere in the house has been very abnormal recently. If you don't come over soon, I'm afraid that the house won't be peaceful in the future." Auntie Fong wasn't worried about herself. At worst, she could just leave when the time came. But if the young master didn't wake up soon, what would happen in the future? What Auntie Fong couldn't see was that at the place where she had just been, hidden behind the curtains, wisps of black fog were swirling around, making the air in that place seem extra gloomy and cold. The puppet doll listened to Auntie Fong's long-winded words for a long time before turning to leave, closing the door behind him. When Auntie Fong went out, she only left the door ajar. When she walked past the corner of the corridor, the door seemed to be pushed by something at the empty entrance. With a click, the door lock automatically buckled. At the same time, the wisps of black fog by the curtains slowly condensed in front of the bed. Slowly, they formed the shape of a human baby in midair. It was the puppet doll, or rather, Chen Biue now. Chen Biue slowly looked at his body on the bed. At such a close distance, he felt very strange. He could feel the current state of his body, as if his consciousness was still in his body, but he couldn't control this body. The person on the bed was clearly not in a good state. Even if there was someone taking care of him carefully, the long period of bedridden had made this body weak and weak. The puppet doll Chen Biue carefully approached the window. Then, he reached out a hand and gently touched his body. He could feel his body calling out to him. The moment his hand touched Chen Biue's body on the bed, there seemed to be a strong pulling force from that body. Puppet doll Chen Biue was overjoyed. He did not resist and allowed this phenomenon to be discovered without hesitation. Perhaps this was the opportunity for him to return to his own body. However, reality proved that the matter of the soul returning to its original place was not that simple. Chen Biue could clearly feel his soul enter his body, but it was expelled in a moment. It was as if his body had started to reject the entry of his soul. He didn't believe in such a thing. He persevered and tried again, but it still didn't work. After many attempts, Chen Biue finally accepted his fate. He was sure that if he couldn't find someone to help him, he wouldn't be able to return to his body on his own. As soon as this thought appeared in his mind, Gu Xingyin's figure subconsciously appeared. Chapter 1703. There was a saying that when a person was in trouble, the first person he would turn to for help would be the person he trusted the most at the bottom of his heart. Chen Biue didn't expect that when he was in trouble, the person he would turn to wasn't his biological father or his good friend. Instead, it was the woman he had only known for a short 10 days. It was a strange feeling. However, Chen Biue shook his head in the end. He wanted to trust her, but who knew if he could trust her? Since he couldn't return to his body, there was no point in staying here any longer. Chen Biue looked around and didn't find anything wrong with the room he was in. Then, he turned into a dark room and left. He didn't leave immediately. Instead, he wandered around the Chen family. Speaking of which, he had been in a daze for so long. He didn't know how the Chen family was doing. As soon as he came out, Chen Biue saw his father. Old Master Chen was wearing a dark red tang suit and holding a wooden walking stick. He was in high spirits and was politely chatting with an old man with a calm expression. Hearing how his father addressed him, Chen Biue knew in his heart that this was probably another person from the metaphysics school. Although this person from the Xian sect looked calm, he didn't hide the arrogance in his eyes. Chen Biue only glanced at him and lost interest. In his opinion, this person from the Xian sect looked like an expert. Even he could kill 5 of them by himself. He was most likely another person who pretended to be mysterious and fished for fame. From what he heard, his father must have thought a lot before inviting this master over, hoping that he could wake up his eldest son. Chen Biue didn't have any hope in this matter. He just felt sorry for his father. Obviously, old Master Chen still hadn't given up on his son. He watched as the master entered his room calmly. After seeing him, he was hesitant. Then he was shocked. In the end, his expression was very ugly. Not only Chen Biue, but old Master Chen could also see that there was nothing he could do. In the end, the master only said a lot of things that normal people wouldn't understand. Then he took the Chen family's generous reward and left. Chen Biue watched quietly as his father locked himself in the study. He didn't follow. Perhaps someone like his father didn't want anyone to see him in such a weak state. Chen Biue continued to walk around the house. When he passed by one of the rooms, he suddenly heard something that made his eyes turn cold. This was the room of his biological sister, Chen Qiqi. At this time, Chen Qiqi was talking to someone. The black fog ignored the tightly shut door and went straight in. Chen Qiqi was sitting on the bed in the room, holding her phone in one hand and tugging at the bedsheets in boredom with the other. Yes, the old man sent someone over again today, but it seems to be useless. Her tone was very cheerful when she said this. He didn't know what the other side said, but Chen Biue could roughly guess that they were proud of themselves. Because he immediately heard Chen Qiqi say, "Yes, yes, yes, my dear, you're really amazing. Well, not only are you good at black magic, in bed, you're even better." Chen Biue listened expressionlessly. His heart was strangely calm when he found out that his own sister was the one who tried to kill him. He even had a feeling that this was indeed the case. Chapter 1704. Chen Biue stared coldly at Chen Qiqi, who had her back to him. He didn't hesitate at all. With a thought, a cloud of black fog shrouded Chen Qiqi. What was the point of keeping a sister who wanted to kill him for her own selfish desires? Chen Qiqi felt a chill all over her body. She felt as if she had fallen into an ice cave in an instant and couldn't help but scream. The person on the other side of the phone sensed that something was wrong and hurriedly asked her what was wrong. Since Chen Qiqi met this taming master, she had become a firm believer in metaphysics and fortune-telling. She didn't dare to hide anything from him and hurriedly told him about her current situation. The taming master was conceited, and he was very infatuated with Chen Qiqi's debauchery in bed. When he heard Chen Qiqi's request, he naturally asked her to go to the living room, a place with stronger yang energy, and he would immediately rush over. This was exactly what Chen Biue wanted. Chen Biue didn't leave. Chen Qiqi listened to the taming master and sat in the living room. He also hid in a corner in the shape of a cloud of black fog. Now the yin energy had completely entered Chen Qiqi's body. She had put on a coat, but she still felt very cold. The taming master quickly entered the room. The servants at home didn't let him in at first. Chen Qiqi said angrily, "This is my friend. Do you know how to do things? If not, get out of the Chen family." She looked at the taming master expectantly. "Dear, please take a look at me. What's wrong with me?" She couldn't help shivering as she spoke. The taming master reached out and touched Chen Qiqi's hand. It was May, but Chen Qiqi's hand was as cold as ice. He winked at Chen Qiqi. She understood and stood up. The two of them went upstairs to Chen Qiqi's room. Seeing this scene, the servants at home just sighed and shook their heads, as if they didn't like Mrs. Behavior. Chen Biue followed them coldly. He put the yin energy on Chen Qiqi's body just now to draw out the person behind the scenes. Now he finally saw the real face of the person behind the scenes. The other party was a man who looked to be in his 30s. Previously, he was wearing a baseball cap when he came in. Now that he had taken off his cap, one could clearly see the dense runes engraved on his bald head. Chen Biue instantly thought of the runes on his puppet. The two were obviously not on the same page. However, Chen Biue felt an evil and powerful force from this man. This should be the black magic that this man practiced. When the taming master was about to examine Chen Qiqi, he suddenly frowned and glanced in the direction where Chen Biue was hiding. He didn't know if it was an illusion, but he felt as if he was being watched by some ferocious beast. But when he sensed it carefully, he found that the feeling was gone. Chen Biue stood there quietly, allowing him to size him up. Not to mention the fact that he didn't have a physical body at the moment, it wasn't easy for him to be discovered. Even if a tame headmaster sensed it, he would only be able to sense a ball of Een energy. It was too shocking for Een specters to gain self-awareness. Even a Een lady like Een only had one white tiger by her side. As for the puppet doll, it was an exception. Chen Bue felt his hands itching. If they weren't in the Chen family, he didn't want to disturb his father. He wanted to kill this man and woman at any time. Chapter 1705. Gu Shengyin looked at the puppet doll in surprise. How long had it been since it was created? It could actually speak human language. She was so happy that she quickly shouted, "Doll, come here." Chen Bue opened his green eyes and looked at the naked body and the warm water in the pool. He was thinking, should he go down? Or should he go down? However, just as he was thinking, Gu Shengyin finally remembered her current state. She couldn't bear her body in front of a self-aware doll, even if it was just a puppet. So she directly said, "Turn around, doll." When she said this, she had a commanding tone, like an adult talking to a naughty child. Then, under the effect of the contract, the puppet doll turned around without any resistance. Puppet Chen Bue doll? When his body was finally under his control, he found that the person opposite him had put on a bathrobe and walked out of the pool. Chen Bue looked at the person wrapped up tightly. In his lowered green eyes, there was a trace of regret. Gu Shengyin didn't notice. Of course, this was mostly because she didn't think that her little puppet doll could think of such complicated things. After resting and relaxing, it was time to get down to business. She sat on the bed and asked the puppet doll, "What did you see today?" If the puppet doll didn't have its own consciousness, Gu Shengyin would directly enter its consciousness and extract its memories. But now, Gu Shengyin thought that since the puppet doll had its own consciousness, it had become an independent individual. In this way, he could already be considered a special life form. Since it was a life form, it should be treated with enough respect. So, Gu Shengyin asked Chen Bue. Her action made Chen Bue sigh in relief. If she directly extracted the memories, the fact that he was Chen Bue's soul couldn't be hidden from Gu Shengyin. Although he didn't think what would happen if this was known by the person in front of him, after the awkward meeting in the pool just now, he still felt a little strange. And most importantly, if she directly extracted the memories, his shameful thoughts, Chen Bue put aside those distracting thoughts and slowly began to transmit everything he saw in the Chen family directly to Gu Shengyin's mind. Because it was his own choice, he omitted some things about his identity that Gu Shengyin didn't need to know. Gu Shengyin seemed to use the puppet doll's eyes to experience everything that Chen Bue saw in the whole night. In fact, Gu Shengyin herself knew most of the things happened. Based on the puppet doll's probing, she could roughly tell that this taming master was no match for her at all. In this case, she thought silently and couldn't help but mutter, "What kind of excuse should I find to try and wake up the eldest young master of the Chen family?" She didn't notice that the puppet doll was shocked when it heard this. She actually wanted to wake it up. There was nothing more surprising than this. Gu Shengyin felt that her arm was poked. She looked down in confusion and found that a memory in her mind was repeated. There were only 7 chapters today. I really couldn't write anymore. There was a notice of leave at the top of the book review and comment section. I'll make up for it tomorrow. I'm really sorry. Chapter 1706. Gu Shengyin didn't understand. She looked through her memories. It was the scene of old man Chen politely accompanying a person from the Xian sect. At first, Gu Shengyin didn't understand what the doll meant. But after thinking for a bit, her eyes lit up. She looked at the doll. "You're saying that you want me to recommend myself? Take the initiative to go to them?" The doll nodded heavily. Chen Bue knew that his father wouldn't be willing to give up any chance at this time. In old man Chen's eyes, the only suitable successor was his eldest son, Chen Bue. This wasn't because he favored sons over daughters. He just understood his own children. His eldest son, Chen Bue, was first class in both ability and temperament. If he took over the Chen family, he might be able to push the Chen family to another peak. As for his daughter, Chen Qiqi, she was ruthless but lacked ability. Her vision was also a bit lacking. When Chen Bue fell, the most anxious person was old man Chen. He knew very well that the Chen family had countless branches. Some of the more ambitious ones were eyeing the current Chen family. He could still suppress them now. If he was 100 years old, his eldest son would be fine, but his youngest daughter Chi-Chi? He wouldn't be able to suppress those greedy people. So these days, old man Chen had been sparing no effort to find an expert, hoping to wake his eldest son up. Gu Xingyin lowered her head and thought for a bit. She felt that this was feasible. She smiled at the doll and praised it. "Doll, you're really amazing." The puppet doll just stared at Gu Xingyin with its green eyes. It flew over to her and perched on her shoulder, playing with her hair. Gu Xingyin didn't rest well the entire night. She was a bit tired and fell asleep as soon as her head hit the pillow. Chen puppet doll Baiyu sat on her pillow and looked down at the person who was sleeping with her eyes closed. She was still the same. Her face was pale and her lips were purplish. She looked like a decadent but beautiful poppy, luring humans to be attracted to her like moths to a flame. Chen Biyue was the one who was seduced. He remained motionless, staring at the person on the bed over and over again as if he was possessed. It was as if he would never get tired of looking at her. After an unknown amount of time, Chen Biyue suddenly bent down. His body was too small. Even though he was sitting on the pillow, there was still some distance between him and Gu Xingyin's face. He crawled forward with his hands and feet. After crawling a few times, he finally came into contact with the person sleeping on the pillow. Chen Biyue gently grabbed Gu Xingyin's hair with his small hand. Finally, he kissed Gu Xingyin's face. It felt so good. He grinned contentedly. The system that didn't need to rest as well. His hands were itching, but he had to endure it. Fortunately, after kissing Gu Xingyin, Chen Biyue didn't do anything else. His small body curled up in the side of Gu Xingyin's neck. He closed his eyes and pretended to fall asleep with her. When Gu Xingyin woke up, it was already afternoon. She stretched lazily and tidied herself up. Then, she walked straight to the Chen family's house. Of course, the white tiger and the puppet doll were still in her pocket. When old Master Chen heard that someone wanted to see him, he felt a bit strange. The housekeeper said, "That guest looks a bit strange." She said that she came for young master. Chapter 1707. Old Master Chen's expression changed when he heard this. He personally walked to the door with his walking stick. When Gu Xingyin was alone in the hotel with the puppet, she would subconsciously reveal a trace of her nature. However, in front of outsiders, she would definitely maintain her noble and cold persona to the point that not even a drop of water could leak out. Old Master Chen looked at Gu Xingyin. He had some doubts in his heart. After all, Gu Xingyin did not look like a good person. But who was he? No matter what he thought in his heart, he would not show it on his face. Moreover, old Master Chen had more contact with people like Gu Xingyin. He knew that some masters liked to pursue some unique styles, so he quickly recovered. He said politely, "I heard that master is here for my son. May I know how to address you?" Gu Xingyin's expression was indifferent, like the ice and snow on the cold mountain that never melted all year round. Her voice was equally cold. "Dean, I can save your son." Chen Biyue sat in Gu Xingyin's pocket. Although his eyes were covered by the pocket, he could clearly see Gu Xingyin's appearance at this time. He had never seen his master like this. It was hard to imagine that such an arrogant, indifferent, and insufferably arrogant person was the same person who would laugh and stretch in private. Old Master Chen politely welcomed them into the house and ordered someone to serve tea. He asked straightforwardly, "Master Dean, which faction do you belong to? Do you have any requests that I can make?" Asking about Gu Xingyin's faction was just a casual question. The last sentence was the main point. Old Master Chen, who had lived for so many years, was not a young and impetuous boy. Naturally, he would not believe that a pie would fall from the sky. In his opinion, the person in front of him must have a request for the Chen family since she took the initiative to come to him and said that she could save his son. He never believed that there would be a great philanthropist in the world who would give without asking for anything in return. However, it was obvious that Gu Xingyin was going to make him miscalculate. She still had that cold expression on her face, and the words that came out of her mouth carried a hint of mockery. "There's nothing in your house that I'm interested in." I'm willing to cure your son today because I'm happy. Old Master Chen. He didn't deny that he was a little unhappy when he heard the other party's first sentence. After all, the other party's words were simply criticizing the Chen clan as if they were worthless. However, when he heard Gu Xingyin's second sentence, he began to have doubts again. What kind of reason was that? He carefully raised his head and looked at Gu Xingyin, but he could not find any clues from her expression. He knew that some people in the celestial sect of wonders were eccentric. They spoke and did things according to their own preferences. Could it be that this person was also one of those people? Gu Xingyin felt old Master Chen's gaze and her voice suddenly became colder. Although her voice was cold, the bystanders could still tell that it was just her way of speaking. However, old Master Chen could hear that the other party was a little unhappy from the tone of her voice. If it weren't for the fact that I don't like the person who did it behind my back, what do you think the Chen family has that's worth me doing it personally? Gu Xingyin flicked her sleeves coldly and said, "Since you're worried about my purpose, why should I come here to annoy you?" Chapter 1708. As she spoke, she actually lifted her foot and walked out without hesitation. Old Master Chen was shocked. He couldn't care about anything else and hurriedly walked up. He stopped Gu Xingyin and even bent down to apologize for his previous behavior. "Master, it's my fault for neglecting you. Please don't be angry." Gu Xingyin looked at him with a faint smile and said, "I just feel hungry. You need to know something. For example, if I really want to do something to young Master Chen and the Chen family, I don't need to come here personally." Old Master Chen knew that he was still angry because of his suspicion. He hurriedly apologized. In fact, Gu Xingyin just wanted to protect the character setting of Di-yin. She didn't like to see an old man in his 50s grovel in front of her. So she softened her expression. "No need to apologize. Anyway, after this incident, we won't have any more interactions." Old Master Chen was delighted when he heard this. Judging from this master's words, she should agree to save his son. Chen Biyue had been quietly staying in the pocket. He watched as his father bowed and apologized to a stranger for his sake. After all, that was his father. He blamed Gu Xingyin. Why was she so cold? But on second thought, Di-yin and Chen Biyue were just two strangers who didn't know each other. Di-yin was willing to save him. No matter what the purpose was, it was a great favor for the Chen family. Moreover, it was obvious that she was like this outside. People with abilities always had privileges. When their abilities were questioned, it was normal for them to be unhappy. Chen Biyue was still letting his imagination run wild. Gu Xingyin had already walked back into the living room of the Chen family. Gu Xingyin was not in the mood to make small talk. "Take me to see her." Old Master Chen personally led Gu Xingyin upstairs. At this time, the door below was opened. Chen Qiqi, who was wearing a black professional dress, came back from outside with a bag. She immediately spotted Gu Xingyin, who was walking beside her father. Chen Qiqi knew Di-yin. At that time, she personally asked Di-yin to help, but Di-yin rejected her. Now, why did she come to the Chen family? Could it be that he wanted to expose what he had done? Chen Qiqi shouted, "Dad." Grandpa Chen turned around and smiled apologetically at Gu Xingyin. "That's my second daughter." Gu Xingyin did not say anything. Chen Qiqi rushed upstairs and looked at Gu Xingyin warily. However, she asked old Master Chen, "Dad, who is this person?" Grandpa Chen said, "This is a master. He's here for your brother's health." Chen Qiqi's heart trembled. She had approached Di-yin because she had heard of his reputation. Father actually managed to get Dean to help? Could this person really be able to cure his brother? Moreover, she knew what she wanted to do at that time. Although Chen Qiqi did not say that he was targeting her brother, Chen Qiqi felt that he could definitely guess it based on Chen Biyue's current situation. She could not let her father believe Di-yin. Chen Qiqi glanced at Gu Xingyin and said to Grandpa Chen, "Father, do you know the background of these so-called masters? This person looks..." Grandpa Chen shouted in a low voice, "Shut up." Chapter 1709. Old Master Chen looked at Gu Xingyin nervously. He had seen the master's temper before. What if his daughter angered the master again with her words? But this time, Gu Xingyin made him confused again. Because she was not angry at all. Not only was she not angry, but she looked at Chen Qiqi with a meaningful smile on her face. This was the first time old Master Chen saw Master Dean smile since he saw her today. But Chen Qiqi did not feel that the smile was friendly at all. Instead, she felt as if an endless chill was being released from that smile, corroding every inch of her body. She couldn't help but shudder. Then, Gu Xingyin said, "Are you in a hurry to stop me because you feel guilty?" As soon as she said this, the faces of the other two people present darkened. Chen Qiqi flew into a rage out of humiliation, while old Master Chen's expression was unreadable. Chen Qiqi was afraid that her father would doubt her because of Gu Xingyin's words, so she hurriedly explained, "Don't talk nonsense. Why would I feel guilty? I can't wait for my brother to get better as soon as possible. But you don't look like a decent master at all. In my opinion, you're clearly..." "Chen Qiqi!" Old Master Chen shouted sternly to stop her. Chen Qiqi quieted down. Old Master Chen said in a deep voice, "I'm going to ask the master to take a look at your brother. Go back to your room now. Don't make trouble without my permission." Chen Qiqi was a little unwilling. She said that she wanted to watch from the side. But before Gu Xingyin could say anything, old Master Chen refused. Chen Qiqi could only go back unwillingly. Gu Xingyin followed old Master Chen into Qin Biyue's room. The room was very clean and there was no unpleasant atmosphere. Obviously, this young master was well taken care of at home. Gu Xingyin walked to Qin Biyue's bed. Looking at his closed eyes, she suddenly bent down. Old Master Chen was shocked, and so was the puppet doll in Gu Xingyin's pocket. Because when Gu Xingyin leaned over, it really looked like she was going to kiss Qin Biyue, who was lying on the bed. But Gu Xingyin did not. When she was still some distance away from Qin Biyue's face, she stopped. There was no smell at all. "It's not him." Gu Xingyin straightened up and began to observe the person in front of him. Old Master Chen heaved a sigh of relief. He thought to himself that he must have been overthinking things just now. This master was clearly a cold and emotionless person. How could he have discordant thoughts towards his own son? The puppet doll in Gu Xingyin's pocket was different. The moment he saw Gu Xingyin bending over, he almost jumped up in shock. Could it be that he and Diane knew each other, and there was some story that he had to tell before? Otherwise, it was hard to understand why she came all the way to the capital to save him. The puppet doll thought happily. But he really did not have any memory of knowing Diane. Moreover, he had never been to that valley, so it was impossible for him to know Diane. Seeing Gu Xingyin straightened up again without any expression and did not kiss him, the puppet doll felt a sense of regret. Then, he was once again shocked by Gu Xingyin's words. Gu Xingyin said faintly, "Take off his clothes." Chapter 17:10. There were only two people in the room. Gu Xingyin couldn't take off a man's clothes by herself. Of course, her words were directed at old Master Chen. Old Master Chen didn't react for a moment. He looked at Gu Xingyin. Gu Xingyin repeated her words. "If it's not convenient for you, you can find an outsider to take it off." Old Master Chen was sure that Gu Xingyin was really going to take off his son's clothes. He thought about it and didn't let anyone in. Instead, he walked forward himself. Because he had been in bed for a long time, Qin Biyue was wearing a set of convenient pajamas. It was easier to take them off. Old Master Chen took off his outerwear and looked hesitantly at Gu Xingyin, who was looking down. Gu Xingyin's voice didn't fluctuate at all. It was as if the person in front of her was just a stone or a blade of grass, not a naked man. "Take it all off." Old Master Chen was silent for a moment. Then he took off his eldest son's clothes. The puppet doll that had been lying in Gu Xingyin's pocket. An inexplicable sense of shame surged in his mind. This thought came too suddenly and was too strong. Chen Biyue couldn't control himself and was caught by Gu Xingyin. Chen Biyue's entire body froze. He was afraid that Gu Xingyin would be suspicious. However, Gu Xingyin didn't suspect him. She thought that the puppet doll had never seen a naked human body before, so it was embarrassed. She comforted the puppet doll. "Doll, don't be afraid. It's just a normal human body. Doll is like this too." Hearing Gu Xingyin's words, Chen Biyue knew that she didn't suspect him. He sighed in relief. Then the doll, who finally had time to think about other things, felt frustrated again. She didn't have any reaction to his body at all. Not to mention that she liked to be praised, she didn't even feel shy. Chen Biyue felt like he had failed. Just as he was about to reflect on his lack of charm, he saw Gu Shengyin walk up to him, and then Chen Biyue's eyes widened. On the other side, old Master Chen, who had been paying close attention to this side, also gasped. Gu Shengyin's hand started from the forehead of the person on the bed. Her index finger and middle fingers slowly slid down. If it wasn't for Gu Shengyin's cold expression, as if she was just evaluating a lifeless object, her attitude would definitely be related to lust. Chen Biyue felt like he was about to burn up. Although he wasn't in his own body right now, he felt as if his soul was being ignited by Gu Shengyin's actions. He could not help but look at Gu Shengyin. This glance made his burning mind sober up quite a bit. Because Gu Shengyin's expression didn't show any emotion. It was as if the adult male body in front of her was no different from a weed by the roadside. At this moment, her hand had already reached Chen Biyue's heart. Then her fingers paused. Gu Shengyin raised her eyebrows. Old Master Chen watched in horror. This master's fingers suddenly bent, and the purple-black long nails sank into his son's heart just like that. He didn't even have time to speak before he ran over. With such a sharp nail piercing into his chest, could his son still be saved? Chapter 1711. Gu Shengyin naturally saw Old Master Chen's actions. "Don't come over." Old Master Chen didn't listen at all. That was his son. Gu Shengyin shouted in a low voice, "White tiger." A tiger's roar suddenly sounded in the room. A huge white tiger suddenly appeared in front of Old Master Chen. It was almost as tall as a normal person's chest. The tiger stood firmly in front of Old Master Chen. It arched its body and directly carried him to stand far away by the door. Old Master Chen opened his mouth and wanted to scold. He hated himself for not recognizing people clearly and causing harm to his son. His gaze fell on Gu Shengyin, but he suddenly paused. He didn't see any blood coming out from his son's wound. Gu Shengyin's 5 fingers were almost all inserted into Chen Biyue's chest. The situation was very similar to the legendary demon's heart. In such a situation, it should have been bloody. Old Master Chen didn't see any blood and his heart calmed down a little. Then he saw Gu Shengyin's hand move. She slowly pulled her fingers out. As her fingers pulled out, Old Master Chen could clearly see that a thin black line seemed to be grasped by Gu Shengyin's hand. Slowly, it was pulled out of his son's heart. That thin line was still dancing crazily as if it had a life of its own. Old Master Chen was a little shocked when he saw it. However, Gu Shengyin grabbed it tightly with one hand and pulled it out. The thin line completely left Chen Biyue's body and appeared in the air. After it was exposed in the air, it suddenly disappeared as if it had met its natural enemy. However, Gu Shengyin could see it. Seeing that it was still trying to drill into the only normal person present, Old Master Chen, Gu Shengyin snorted coldly, "White tiger." The white tiger roared and suddenly opened its mouth. A huge suction force appeared in the void and completely swallowed the cluster of black fog that was almost invisible to the naked eye. Old Master Chen looked at this scene in shock. Although he had always been interested in metaphysics, this was the first time he had come into such close contact with it. Remembering something, he hurriedly ran out from behind the white tiger and ran to Chen Biyue's bed to look at him. Her son's chest was clean and smooth. Where was the slightest trace of injury? Knowing that he had misunderstood the master, Old Master Chen blamed himself. "I was really anxious just now. I'm really sorry for disturbing the master." Gu Shengyin waved her hand. "No need." The puppet doll had been watching silently. Even when Gu Shengyin's fingers reached into its body, it did not react at all. He knew that Gu Shengyin was trying to save him. When he saw what Gu Shengyin pulled out of his body, he finally understood why his body had been rejecting him earlier. It wasn't just because he had been separated from his soul for too long. More importantly, the existence of this thing was rejecting him. Old Master Chen came back to his senses and asked with lingering fear, "Master, that black thing just now, what was it?" Any normal person would feel a chill down their spine when they saw that thing drilling into a person's body. However, Gu Shengyin said, "You can put on your clothes now." Old Master Chen was stunned for a moment before he reacted. His son was still lying on the bed naked. He bent down to put on his son's clothes and heard the master slowly say, "He was bewitched." Chapter 1712. Black Magic. Grandpa Chen was shocked. Of course, he had heard of black magic. But wasn't this kind of evil thing usually exclusive to Thailand and other countries? How did Bai Yu offend someone like that in the capital? Grandpa Chen suppressed his thoughts and hurriedly asked what he was most concerned about. "Master, what about my son?" Gu Xingyi nodded. "After a while, at midnight tonight, I'll perform a spell to see if I can summon his soul back." Old Master Chen's face was filled with gratitude. "Thank you, Master." He looked at the time and said, "Master, why don't you take a rest first? I'll ask the kitchen to make something to eat." When Gu Shengyin went out, it was close to night. She came over after dinner. Hearing that, she shook her head. "But, can you prepare a room for me? I need to rest." Grandpa Chen had no problem with that. In a villa like the Chen family's, there were usually many empty guest rooms. They were cleaned on a daily basis so that guests could stay in them. Gu Shengyin followed Grandpa Chen outside, leaving the white tiger in the room. Grandpa Chen was confused. Gu Shengyin explained, "The person behind this might know that I'm here to help young Master Chen. They might come to make trouble tonight." Grandpa Chen's expression turned serious when he heard that. He suddenly remembered what Gu Shengyin had said earlier. He suddenly asked in a low voice, "Master, do you know who the person behind this is?" Gu Shengyin didn't hide that she knew from the beginning. She nodded straightforwardly. She looked at Grandpa Chen's hesitant expression and suddenly said, "Don't ask me who it is. I've already said what I need to say. It's up to you whether you believe me or not." Grandpa Chen was a little confused when he saw Gu Shengyin enter the room. How could he not understand after hearing those words? This master had said those words to Chi-Chi the moment she entered the room. Chi-Chi's reaction was indeed a little strange. Could it be that Chi-Chi was the one who attacked Bai Yu just like what the master said? Old Master Chen did not want to believe this possibility at all. His biological son and daughter were both his flesh and blood. Before he had concrete evidence, he would never believe that his daughter would do such a crazy thing to her brother. Gu Shengyin entered the room. She sat on the chair and finally relaxed. Although he was still indifferent, he didn't have the cold arrogance that he had in front of old Master Chen. The puppet doll automatically flew out of her pocket. Gu Shengyin looked at him in surprise. "What's the matter, baby?" Doll looked at her without blinking, then opened its mouth and said clearly, "Sleep." Gu Shengyin laughed. "I'm not tired." In her opinion, it was probably because she took the initiative to ask for a rest, and the little fellow thought that she was tired. Chen Biue looked at Gu Shengyin. As a contracted puppet, he knew that the consumption just now was nothing to die in. But when he thought about how she had to perform a ritual for him in the middle of the night, he wanted her to rest more. Thus, Gu Shengyin looked at the little doll in front of her. It seemed that he didn't hear her at all. She repeated, "Sleep." Gu Shengyin helplessly thought that since there was nothing else, she might as well sleep. Chapter 1713. Unfortunately, she wanted to sleep, but someone didn't allow her. Gu Shengyin was lying on the bed, and the puppet doll was nestled in her neck contentedly. However, someone knocked on the door. Gu Shengyin didn't respond, and the person pushed the door open and came in. Seeing Gu Shengyin like this, ordinary people should know not to continue to disturb her. But the person didn't know this. Chen Chi-Chi looked at Gu Shengyin, who was lying on the bed with a satisfied face, and felt a little angry in her heart. Is this woman purposely going against me? At that time, she had said all kinds of good things, but she was unwilling to help her. But now, she actually agreed to father's request and came to save brother? At this time, Chen Chi-Chi still didn't know that Gu Shengyin was not asked to come by old Master Chen, but she came to do charity for free. If she knew, she would probably vomit blood in anger. Chen Chi-Chi walked to the window and looked at Gu Shengyin in a low voice. "Why did you come to the capital?" As soon as she said this, Chen Biue, who was lying on Gu Xingyin's pillow and pretending to be a doll, was shocked. His sister actually knew Dean? Gu Xingyin even maintained her lying position and didn't care about Chen Qiqi's arrival at all. People who didn't respect others couldn't expect to be respected by others. The moment Chen Qiqi entered the door, she completely returned to her cold persona. Chen Qiqi was standing, while Gu Xingyin was lying down. But Chen Qiqi felt that the way Gu Xingyin looked at her was still so arrogant and insufferably arrogant. Gu Xingyin seemed to be standing on a high place and looking down at her coldly. The capital is so big. Can you decide who can and can't come? In Chen Qiqi's entire life, she had never been treated with such blatant disdain. Because she was the daughter of the Chen family, she was surrounded by friends who knew her family background. Many people took the initiative to get close to and curry favor with her. In the past 2 years, Chen Qiqi had only felt this kind of look twice. The first time was when Dean rejected her. The second time, it was still the same person. Chen Qiqi's expression turned ugly. I don't care why you came to the capital. I spent a lot of money to hire you that day, but you refused to help me. What about now? But now, you're willing to save my brother. Gu Xingyin still looked cold and indifferent. Because you made me unhappy. And now, I'm in a good mood. Chen Qiqi's face was ashen. She seemed to have realized that it was useless to talk back to the person in front of her. Although the other party was not the quick-witted type, he had the ability to make people gnash their teeth in hatred with every sentence. She came a little closer. I warn you, Dean, she said. It's best that you don't interfere in this matter. Otherwise, you won't be able to protect the little valley and the puppets in the Divine Dragon Mountain range. Gu Xingyin pursed her lips in boredom. Chen Qiqi's words and actions were always like this. She would say nice things at the beginning, and then when she realized that the temptation didn't work, she would start to speak harshly. From the beginning to the end, her attitude was so annoying. Gu Xingyin closed her eyes. Instead of worrying about me, you should worry about how to get over your brother's matter. Take care. I won't see you out. Chen Qiqi was so angry that she wanted to swear. Suddenly, she saw the little doll lying on Gu Xingyin's neck move. Then, it turned its head to look at her expressionlessly. A pair of green eyes stared at her. A cold feeling rose from the bottom of her heart. Chen Qiqi broke out in a cold sweat. She didn't even dare to say another word. She quickly opened the door and ran out. Chapter 17:14. Chen Qiqi ran back to her room in one breath. After closing the door tightly, she was still a little scared. She always felt that the terrifying doll's eyes seemed to be haunting her all the time. Even if she couldn't see it now, she still felt that the pair of cold eyes with murderous intent stayed in her mind. She ran to the bed, turned on all the lights in the room, and wrapped herself tightly in the quilt. Then she took out her mobile phone and called the witch doctor. Hello, in Gu Xingyin's room. After Chen Qiqi left, Gu Xingyin grabbed the puppet doll beside the pillow. Who taught you to scare people like this? Although the words were slightly reproachful, everyone could hear the laughter in the tone. The waist of the puppet doll was grabbed by Gu Xingyin. He struggled a few times, but he still couldn't free himself from Gu Xingyin's big palm. Gu Xingyin wanted to let him go at first, but when he saw the fair and tender little dumpling waving his short limbs and struggling in his hand, he suddenly had a bad taste in his mouth. She smiled and looked at the little ball waving his hands and feet. Until the little ball seemed to understand her thoughts, he calmed down and stopped moving. Gu Xingyin laughed out loud. She still lay on the bed, put the little ball on her body, and let go of her hand. Chen Biyue looked at her silently. He felt that he couldn't tell her that the soul in the puppet doll was Chen Biyue. Gu Xingyin looked at the fat ball sitting with a straight face. She couldn't help but smile. Are you angry? Chen Biyue looked at her smile and was stunned. He didn't even hear what she asked clearly. Gu Xingyin looked at the puppet doll's expressionless face. Even its eyes were in a daze. He couldn't help but raise his body slightly and kiss the doll's delicate and cold face. Don't be angry. I'm just kidding. As Gu Xingyin had inherited Diane's memories, he roughly understood that these puppets that could develop self-awareness were no different from ordinary human children in terms of intelligence. They were attached to their creator like family members. That was why Gu Shengyin kissed him. Chen Biyue never thought that he could get such a benefit. He couldn't help but reach out and touch the left side of his face where he was kissed. Fortunately, the puppet couldn't blush. Otherwise, Chen Biyue felt that his face would be burning. Then, Gu Shengyin saw a small figure pouncing on him, and he felt a chill on his face. The puppet doll followed suit and planted a kiss on his face. Gu Shengyin felt that her heart was going to melt. Chen Biyue buried his head in Gu Shengyin's neck and secretly despised himself for pretending to be young. But if he had to choose again, the righteous young master of the Chen family said that he would still kiss her. Gu Shengyin and the puppet doll were in a good mood. On the other side, Qin Chichi's phone call with the taming master ended. After ending the call, Qin Chichi's heart calmed down a little. But when she looked at the time, her body reflexively shivered. Ever since she was poisoned by the Yin energy, although the taming master helped her control it, it became harder and harder to control the Yin energy in her body every night. Chapter 17:15. Just like now. Chen Qiqi only felt that the coldness seeping out from the innermost part of her body, from her 5 viscera and 6 bowels, was about to freeze her. She turned the heater in the room to the maximum. Her forehead was sweating because it was hot. But her body was still shivering inside. Before Chen Qiqi had experienced this feeling, she would never have thought that there would be such a way of torturing people in this world. Chen Qiqi, who had experienced it countless times, knew that this was just the beginning. When it was later, the coldness would be worse. At that time, it would be better to die than to live. 11 o'clock. The whole villa of the Qin family was quiet. The servants had gone to bed. Hearing Gu Shengyin's words, old Master Qin didn't tell anyone that he would perform the ritual for his son at midnight. A black shadow quietly appeared at the gate of the Qin family. Then, the shadow passed through the alloy gate that was strong enough to block bullets as if it was a real shadow. Following the darkness, it came to the door of a room on the 2nd floor. According to what he knew, this was Qin Biyue's room. Suddenly, a black shadow appeared in front of the closed door. The room was quiet. There was only a human-shaped bulge on the bed. It was Qin Biyue, the eldest young master of the Qin family, who was sleeping there. The black shadow rushed at Qin Biyue in a very fast way. From the looks of it, it seemed like it was going to crash into his body. Just as it was about to reach the bed, an earth-shattering roar of a tiger suddenly rang in its ears. Then, a strong suction force came from behind. The white fox swallowed the black shadow in one gulp. Puff! In an apartment not far from the Chen family, the tame headmaster, whose head was full of official inscriptions, changed his expression and spat out a mouthful of blood. The opponent is too strong. He seemed to have a premonition. He forced his injured body to pack up the things in the room and went out. No one in the Qin family's villa was awakened. Those who should be asleep were asleep. Those who couldn't sleep were waiting for the arrival of midnight. Except for the black shadow, no one else seemed to have heard the earth-shattering roar of the tiger. 11:30. Gu Shengyin's door was gently knocked. She turned on the light and got up to open the door. As expected, the person standing outside was old Master Qin, who was neatly dressed. Old Master Qin was still dressed the same way he did during the day. He looked very energetic. Obviously, he was one of the people who couldn't sleep that night. "Sorry to disturb you, Master. It's just that the time is coming and I'm very nervous." Old Master Qin didn't lie about his feelings at all. When his eldest son, Qin Biyue, had been in a coma for so long, he had looked for countless masters. But every time his hope had been ignited, it had been extinguished by the ruthless reality. This time, no matter what, at least this grandmaster was more trustworthy than the previous ones. Gu Shengyin said faintly, "I can understand the affection between father and son. Let's go." She walked into Qin Biyue's room. When she turned on the light, she suddenly said, "By the way, not long ago, someone tried to attack the person in bed." Old Master Qin was shocked. Bai Yu was already in such a state, yet there were still people who didn't want to let him go? No, it was very likely that someone knew that he might wake up, so they couldn't wait to make a move before that happened. Old Master Chen's heart turned cold. How many people knew about this today? Chapter 1716. Old Master Chen closed his eyes tightly, not allowing himself to think about that possibility. When his eldest son woke up, a trace of coldness flashed across his eyes. Those who did something wrong had to pay the price. Gu Shengyin walked to Chen Biyue's bed. She looked at the pale man. He was not dead, which meant that his soul was still alive in some corner of this world. As long as his soul was still alive, she was confident that she could pull him back. She turned around. "Mr. Chen, please stay away from me." "White tiger." The white tiger howled to show that it understood. It followed Old Master Chen to a corner. Its master asked it to protect Old Master Chen. Gu Shengyin did not need to do much preparation. She cut her middle finger and dripped a drop of blood on Chen Biyue's forehead. Strangely enough, when the blood landed on Chen Biyue's forehead, it didn't move and automatically condensed into a round and smooth blood bead. It was as if a cinnabar mole had grown in the middle of that person's forehead. Contrasting with his pale skin, there was a strange and bewitching beauty to it. Then Gu Shengyin picked up one of Chen Biyue's hands and used her fingernails to cut the tip of his middle finger, squeezing out a drop of blood. The drop of blood fell on Gu Shengyin's palm and did not dissipate. Instead, it turned into a small crimson blood bead and rolled around. Gu Shengyin sat cross-legged on the floor. She threw the blood bead into the air. The blood bead fell to Gu Shengyin's head and stopped falling. It was as if it was imprisoned in the air by some mysterious force and kept spinning. Gu Shengyin started to close her eyes and murmured something softly. Old Master Chen listened and felt that the words were very obscure. He could not understand. As he listened, he felt that his vision was a little blurry and his mind started to feel dizzy. At this moment, he suddenly felt a pain in his hand. Old Master Chen woke up and realized that the white tiger beside him had bitten him. However, it obviously knew its limits and did not bite through his skin. Knowing that it was helping him, Old Master Chen thanked it. White Tiger let out a low roar. Old Master Chen realized that he couldn't hear anything. He looked towards Gu Shengyin's direction and saw that the small pearl on her head was emitting rings of red light. The faint blood-red light rippled outwards, spreading to an unknown distance. Gu Shengyin knew. As long as she wanted to, this light could cover all the places that her spiritual consciousness could reach. As long as Chen Biyue's soul was within this range, it would be drawn back here by his blood. Her pocket suddenly moved. However, Gu Shengyin, who was in a meditative state, could not see it. Old Master Chen looked strangely at the white and fat doll that came out of the master's pocket. He didn't know that this was a puppet, and he found it strange. Could it be that the Grandmaster's child was so different from the rest? Aren't you afraid that you won't be able to breathe if you keep it in your pocket? Then he was surprised to find that the little doll, which was only the size of his hand, was flying. Old Master Chen silently retracted his previous thoughts. If the Grandmaster's child could fly, what was so strange about raising it in her pocket? Chen Biyue floated in midair. At this moment, he could already feel the strong calling from his body. The doll's body suddenly started to tremble violently. Gu Shengyin seemed to have sensed something and opened her eyes in confusion. Chapter 1717. She looked at the puppet doll not far away from her. It seemed to be experiencing some kind of pain, and its face was distorted. Old Master Chen looked at this scene worriedly. He couldn't hear anything, so he didn't understand what was going on. Of course, even if he could hear, he wouldn't know what was going on. Gu Shengyin had a vague guess. Her incantation stopped in its tracks. Those blood-red lights were meant to find Chen Biyue's spirit, but it seemed like there was no need for that now. The blood droplet above her head suddenly turned into a blur and flew straight towards the puppet doll's forehead in midair. The droplet of blood seeped into the puppet doll's forehead and disappeared under its skin. Gu Shengyin suddenly stood up. When she saw this scene, what else did she not know? It turned out that the eldest young master of the Chen family had been by her side all this time. She stood up and stared at the puppet doll, who seemed to be in extreme pain. Although Chen Biyue's mind was occupied by the tearing pain in his body, he kept a part of his attention on Gu Shengyin. He saw Gu Shengyin stand up and look at him. Her expression changed from one of worry to one of understanding, and finally to one of calmness. At that moment he actually panicked. After all, he had been with Gu Shengyin for such a long time, and he had a certain understanding of her personality. This person was naturally cold-hearted. If he wasn't her puppet, he wouldn't even be able to get a glance from her, right? Furthermore, he definitely couldn't let her know that he had memories of the time he spent with her. Chen Biyue could only think of this. Soon, he couldn't think of anything else. Because it was just too painful. It was the kind of living thing that separated one's soul from the puppet body that one was used to. At this moment, White Tiger also removed the restrictions on Old Master Chen's body. Old Master Chen looked at the scene in front of him in a daze. He looked at Gu Shengyin. Grandmaster, what's going on? Gu Shengyin glanced sideways at him and said faintly, your son's soul accidentally entered the puppet I refined. Now, it's being separated from the puppet's body. Old Master Chen's eyes widened. Didn't they say that their son was bewitched? How did he become a puppet? However, there was an even greater worry in his heart that he didn't voice out. Grandmaster, will Baiyu be all right? Gu Shengyin shook her head. Don't worry, it's just some pain. Once his soul is free, I'll find a way to let him return to his body. When the time comes, you can go find a righteous Dao Xian sect sorcerer and ask for a soul-subduing talisman for him. After a period of time, there will be no problem. Old Master Chen was relieved when he heard this. It didn't take long. 12 o'clock midnight sharp. The puppet doll in midair suddenly began to emit wisps of black mist, spreading towards the surroundings. The temperature in the room instantly dropped. Gu Shengyin said in a low voice, "Stay away." Old Master Chen hurriedly retreated. Gu Shengyin reached out with her left hand. The black mist that was spreading outwards seemed to have found a target and rushed towards her body. Old Master Chen could clearly see that Gu Shengyin's long black hair had already condensed into a large patch of white frost. Chapter 17-18. He looked at it worriedly, but he knew that he could not help at all. Slowly, the black weapons dissipated. At the same time, the pain on the puppet doll's face disappeared. In Gu Shengyin's sight, he could see a transparent white halo coming out of the puppet doll's body. The halo did not move after leaving the puppet doll's body. It just floated in the air quietly. It was also at that moment that Gu Shengyin's heart trembled. The contract between her and the puppet doll was broken. She looked at the white halo. Although she could not guess its direction, she could feel that it was staring at her. Well, she said coldly, now, you can go back to your body. The ball of light didn't move. Gu Shengyin raised his hand and waved his sleeve gently. The white ball of light flew uncontrollably toward Chen Biyue's body and sank into his body. Old Master Chen heard Gu Shengyin talking to the void just now. He couldn't see anything, but he could roughly guess that there was something there. He asked carefully, Master Dean, what was that? Gu Shengyin said, your son's soul has returned to his body. As she spoke, she walked forward and stretched out a hand to feel Chen Biyue's glabella. With a frown, Gu Shengyin reached out his hand and took out a small puppet from his bag. The puppet was very small, about the size of a human thumb. There was a lifelike beast carved on it. Grandpa Chen felt that the beast was familiar, but he could not recognize it. Gu Shengyin did not want to explain it to him. She gave the thing to Chen Xiaoye. Chen Xiaoye's soul will not be stable these days. You can put this under his pillow or hang it on his neck. He will wake up after 3 days. He can't leave this thing for 10 days. Grandpa Chen remembered it all. At this moment, a kacha sound suddenly came from the room. Grandpa Chen and Gu Shengyin looked over at the same time. The puppet doll in the air started to crack from its forehead to its whole body. Then it fell down and shattered into pieces. Grandpa Chen could not help but take a big step back. In his eyes, the puppet doll looked just like a real baby. When he saw this scene, he really couldn't accept it. Gu Shengyin said lightly, it's just a puppet. As she spoke, she slowly walked over, bent down, and placed a clean handkerchief on the ground. Then she picked up all the shards one by one. Old Master Chen's fearful expression suddenly froze. He looked at Gu Shengyin's movements. She was so careful and cherishing it. In hindsight, he realized that this doll was probably very precious to the puppet master in front of him. But because of Baiyu, the doll became like this. Grandpa Chen sighed. He was not a saint. He could not run to Gu Shengyin and say some kind words. Even if he knew that he had to pay a price for his son's return, he would still do it. He just walked up to Gu Shengyin and said in a low voice, "The Chen family will never forget Master's great kindness. If there's anything you need in the future, the Chen family will not hesitate to help." Chapter 1719. Gu Shengyin carefully wrapped the pieces she picked up and put them into her backpack. She got up and turned to old Master Chen, saying, "I told you that I decided to save your son because I'm in a good mood. If I'm in a bad mood, I won't look back even if your son dies immediately. So, you don't have to thank me." Old Master Chen was still smiling. "Although it's a piece of cake for you, it's a life-saving grace for the Chen family. The Chen family will never be ungrateful people." His words made Gu Shengyin secretly admire him. But on the surface, she just said coldly, "It's up to you." She called the white tiger and turned to walk to the window. Old Master Chen shouted behind her, "Master, it's getting late. You should rest for the night and tomorrow." The rest of his words disappeared in his throat. Old Master Chen looked at the strangely dressed puppet master sitting on the white tiger. The man and the tiger leaped toward the window and disappeared. He hurriedly looked out of the window. He saw that the white tiger had landed safely. After a few leaps, the man's figure could no longer be seen. He was indeed a weird-tempered master. The next day, Gu Shengyin bought a plane ticket back to her valley. Since the matter here had been solved, there was no need for her to stay. As for Qin Chichi, when Gu Shengyin left the capital, she secretly gave her a small gift. In the original plot, she burned Dean to death with fire. In this life, Gu Shengyin would let her have a taste of the same feeling. But it was not fire, but ice. She planted the seed of evil in Qin Chichi's body. As long as she wanted, she could take Qin Chichi's life at any time and make her suffer a fate worse than death. But she was not in a hurry. Gu Shengyin still wanted to see how the Chen family would deal with the woman who dared to kill her own brother. Qin Chichi could no longer cause any trouble. Gu Shengyin listened to the system's words. The taming master probably knew that the opponent was too powerful and was afraid that he would be implicated. He had already run out of the imperial capital that very night. Thinking of this, Gu Shengyin sneered, "Qin Chichi even found such an unreliable man." Abandoning his woman at the critical moment was not something an ordinary man could do. Thinking about it, the taming master and Qin Chichi were just cooperating with each other. It was obviously unrealistic to expect people like them to die for others. 3 days later, a refreshing breeze blew in through the open window. The curtains moved slightly. The man's eyelashes. Chen Chen's mind was in a mess. He felt like he had a very strange dream. The dreamland was grotesque and variegated, filled with all sorts of inconceivable things. He hugged his head and moaned in pain. Old Master Chen, who stayed in his son's room most of the time, thought that he was hallucinating. He suddenly turned to look at his son. Sure enough, he saw that the eyes that had been closed for more than a month trembled a few times and opened. "Biyue?" Old Man Chen's voice trembled. His eyes turned red at this moment. Chen Biyue was still not used to the sudden bright environment. He paused for a while before calling out, "Dad?" After saying that, Chen Biyue realized that his voice was abnormally hoarse. "What's wrong with me?" 3 chapters first, see you later. It's almost the end of the month. If you have a monthly ticket, give me a ticket. Chapter 1720. Grandpa Chen hurriedly helped him to sit up. Only then did Qin Biyue realize that his body was completely soft and had no strength at all. Just this small movement of getting up made his head dizzy. Grandpa Chen poured a cup of warm water that he had prepared for a long time and handed it over. Chen Biyue took it and drank it. It was a little salty. Obviously, he had thought about his body and added something. After slowly drinking the cup of water, Chen Biyue sorted out his messy thoughts. Grandpa Chen just looked at him and waited for him to slowly come to his senses. Chen Biyue recalled his previous memories. That morning, he suddenly felt his vision go black and then he lost consciousness. Later, he seemed to be in a gray place. He couldn't see anything and couldn't come into contact with anyone. Later, his expression was a little blank. The only thing he remembered was the pain that seemed to tear his soul apart, but he couldn't remember anything else. What exactly did he experience? Old Master Chen looked at his son's blank expression. He was afraid that this experience would damage his memory, so he quickly asked, "What's wrong?" He hurriedly asked, "Biue, do you still remember what happened before?" Chen Biue replied, "I remember that on the morning of the 14th, I was preparing to go to the company." Then, he didn't say anything else. But Grandpa Chen knew what happened next. He had just returned from his morning exercise when he heard that the family was in chaos. He heard that the young master had fainted. At that time, they all thought that Chen Biue was under too much pressure at work. However, after he was sent to the hospital, the doctor couldn't find anything wrong with him. Grandpa Chen didn't believe it. He went to several hospitals and found all kinds of experts, but still couldn't find the reason for Chen Biue's condition. It wasn't until later that Grandpa Chen started to come into contact with some metaphysical masters that he realized that his eldest son might have been plotted against. Thinking of this, he was silent for a moment and suddenly asked, "Biue, do you know who is targeting you this time?" Chen Biue looked up at his father. The moment he heard this sentence, the name of his sister, Chen Chichi, flashed across his mind. Then he turned back time. The day before he fainted, when he came back from work, he happened to see his sister enter his room. At that time, he thought it was strange and asked Chen Chichi what she was doing. How did Chen Chichi reply at that time? Her expression was a little unnatural. She forced a smile and said, "Well, I don't have anything to do today, so I came to see if you need me to help clean up." Now that he thought about it, this sentence was full of holes. There were servants in charge of cleaning the house. Why would he need Chen Chichi? But at that time, he didn't care so much and just smiled and refused. He hesitated for a moment. Old Master Chen saw that he didn't speak, so he suddenly asked, "Is it Chichi?" Chen Biue looks up in surprise. "Dad, why do you say that?" Old Master Chen's face was a little cold. "Your condition was cured by a master." That master almost said clearly who was behind all of this. Master? Chen Biue frowned. Why couldn't he remember anything? He felt that he must have forgotten something important in his mind. However, that area was dusky, and as soon as he got close, he felt a stabbing pain in his head. Chapter 1721. He couldn't help but cover his forehead with his hand. Seeing his son like this, Old Master Chen was a little flustered. "What's wrong? Does your head hurt?" Chen Biue shook his head. He found that as long as he didn't think about that, he wouldn't feel that tingling sensation. So, what did he forget? He asked, "What's wrong? Why don't I know anything about it?" Hearing this, Old Master Chen explained, "I don't know either. I only know that the master is called Di-in. She's a puppet master." Puppet master. When Chen Biue heard these two names, a pale and delicate face flashed before his eyes. She was Di-in. How could she be? Apart from her appearance, Chen Biue couldn't remember anything else. Chen Biue had already made a decision in his heart. "I'm going to find her." Old Master Chen was still saying, "This master came looking for you himself. After treating you, he left." Chen Biue nodded. He remembered the topic that the father and son had talked about before. "Dad, call Chichi over," Chen Biue said. Old Master Chen's expression froze. But after a moment he didn't say anything and left with his cane. When he came in again, apart from Old Master Chen and Chen Chichi, a middle-aged man in a suit and leather shoes followed behind him. He was the butler that the father and son trusted the most. Chen Chichi was very nervous when she entered the door, because she knew that her brother was awake. Generally speaking, people with ulterior motives would be worried about all kinds of things. For example, Chen Chichi felt that her brother already knew the truth. When her brother woke up, it would be the time for her to be exposed. In fact, to a certain extent, she was right. Chen Biue looked straight at Chen Chichi. His gaze made Chen Chichi very uncomfortable. Chen Chichi shrank a little. She tried to calm herself down and said to Chen Biue with a smile, "Brother, you're finally awake." She didn't get a response from Chen Biue. Chen Biue still stared at her and said in a hoarse voice, "Chen Chichi, I think I'm a qualified brother." Why did you do such a thing? Chen Qiqi panicked. Brother, what are you talking about? What is it? Did you misunderstand something? Old Master Chen also looked at his daughter. He hoped more than anyone else that Chen Qiqi did not do this. Chen Biyue only said coldly, don't quibble anymore. Chen Qiqi, I know your deal with that tame headmaster, and even your conversation. You won't even let your own brother off. You're really heartless. Chen Qiqi shuddered. He even knew about black magic masters? As expected, as long as Chen Biyue didn't die, nothing could be hidden. Her panicked expression suddenly calmed down. Chen Qiqi looked coldly at Chen Biyue and Grandpa Chen. She said coldly, yes. Chen Biyue, I had someone cast black magic on you. Although old Master Chen was mentally prepared, he still couldn't help but sway when he heard his daughter admit it. This evil creature. Chen Qiqi probably felt that she had already been exposed, so she didn't have to hold back anymore. She looked at old Master Chen. There was no longer any admiration or worship in her eyes. Instead, it was slowly filled with resentment. Resentment, old Master Chen realized that his daughter actually hated him. Chapter 1722. Chen Qiqi said coldly, I know that in other people's eyes, I'm the spoiled daughter of the Chen family. I wear big brands and live in villas. Her eyes were filled with disdain. But what's the use of that? Because I'm a daughter, because I'm the youngest, this huge Chen family won't be mine in the future. Compared to those huge assets, what I've enjoyed is nothing. Chen Biyue's voice was calm. So you're unwilling to give up and want to kill your own brother? He had always been in Chen Qiqi's eyes. When he said that, Chen Qiqi panicked. But soon she had nothing to lose. As long as you're dead, I'll be the only heir of the Chen family. So what if Dad doesn't like me? The Chen family can only be left to me. I will let him see that this daughter of mine is no worse than you, her big brother. Chen Biyue snorted in disdain. Chen Qiqi narrowed her eyes. What do you mean? Chen Biyue, are you looking down on me like my dad? She raised her voice. What's there to be proud of? Chen Biyue, you were just born a few years earlier than me. You're a man who can carry on the family line. If I were in your position, I could do the same. Do you believe me? Chen Biyue didn't respond to her. Instead, it was old Master Chen who spoke. His voice was steady. You're wrong, Qiqi. Chen Qiqi's eyes trembled. Old Master Chen said, the Chen family has never chosen an heir based on age or gender. Have you forgotten your grandmother? Chen Qiqi turned her face away, unwilling to believe it. Old Master Chen continued, do you remember the 10 million I gave you when you were 18? Chen Qiqi finally looked up. Old Master Chen looked at her. I remember that you used it to buy a sports car and used the rest to buy bags and big brands. You went out with your friends. But you know, when your brother was 18, I gave him 10 million too. Chen Qiqi seemed to realize something and her face paled. Sure enough, old Master Chen's next words made her fall into a daze. At that time, your brother used this 10 million to invest with a few of his friends to establish the current Imperial Valley Hotel. The Imperial Valley Hotel was a famous 5-star hotel chain in the country. There were 2 of them in the capital alone, and they could be found in the bustling areas of every provincial capital. Old Master Chen sighed. Have you always thought that the Imperial Valley under your brother's name was left to him by me? You're wrong. That's the result of his hard work. And you, Qiqi, your starting point is the same. Chen Qiqi couldn't help but take 2 steps back. She suddenly said to old Master Chen, why didn't you tell me, Dad? I thought it was just my birthday present. Who knows what kind of stupid test it is? Old Master Chen's expression was calm. Yes, this is just one of the tests. Let me tell you again. When you are 20 years old, I will let you. Chen Qiqi never knew that ever since she became an adult, the seemingly casual things that her father asked her to do were actually tests set up by the family for the future successor. She, on the other hand, had completely and utterly lost. After old Master Chen finished speaking, he looked at her quietly. This was not a decision made by me alone. The entire Chen family watched. Qiqi, it's not that I'm biased, but the more power you have, the more responsibility you have to bear. 6 chapters. There were still updates, but whether it was 8 or 10,000 today depended on the situation. Chapter 1723. Chen Qiqi, who was in a daze, was brought back to her room by the housekeeper. The father and son fell into silence. After a long while, Grandpa Chen spoke first. "Biyue, what do you plan to do?" Chen Biyue said, "Dad, you know my character." He raised his head without any expression on his face. "It's not about what I want to do, but can you accept Chen Qiqi?" Grandpa Chen sighed. Chen Biyue knew in his heart that when his father asked this question, he had already expressed his attitude. If he didn't care and let Chen Biyue do whatever he wanted, he wouldn't have probed like this. Grandpa Chen was silent for a long time before he finally said, "I only have you and your sister in my life. When your mother left, she told me to take good care of you." Chen Biyue didn't speak when Grandpa Chen mentioned his mother who had passed away. Grandpa Chen waited for a long time before his son spoke. "I know." Grandpa Chen said in a low voice, "I'm sorry about this. I know it's unfair to you." Chen Biyue shook his head. "There's no such thing as fairness in this kind of thing." Grandpa Chen got up and said, "Have a good rest. Don't think about anything during this period of time. Focus on getting your body back." Chen Biyue nodded. After Grandpa Chen left, Chen Biyue slowly lay down. He thought a lot. Chen Qiqi's matter, his family's matter, and the mysterious puppet master. The last one was like a forbidden zone for Chen Biyue. The only thing he knew was her appearance. It seemed to be deeply engraved in his mind. But other than that, Chen Biyue couldn't think of anything else related to her. Wait until everything is over here. He was going to find her. Gu Shengyin was quite happy during this period of time. She returned to her small valley, bought a car, and bought a lot of things. In this way, Gu Shengyin comforted herself that she lived in a mountain villa. Her puppets had been summoned back by her. After all, Chen Qiqi probably didn't want to take revenge on her anymore. She asked the system to monitor the Chen family's situation at all times. After Chen Biyue woke up, he only spent the first month recuperating. Afterwards, he slowly began to move. Chen Qiqi was under his control in the Chen family. Her phone, computer, and other electronic devices were all monitored. Chen Qiqi had no way of contacting the outside world. The next step was to take out those who were ready to make trouble and teach them a lesson. When he regained control of the Chen family, Chen Biyue finally put Chen Qiqi's matter on the table. He couldn't lock Chen Qiqi up at home for the rest of her life. Chen Biyue's actions during this period of time made Grandpa Chen very satisfied. His son's methods were ruthless and experienced, completely unlike a young man in his 20s. With the Chen family in his hands, there was no need to worry about the future. In the end, the punishment for Chen Qiqi came out. She was sent abroad and given a large sum of money, enough for her to live a luxurious life abroad. The only condition was that he had to live under Chen Biyue's control for the rest of his life, and unless Chen Biyue changed his mind, he was not allowed to return to the country. This was equivalent to a different form of house arrest. Chapter 1724. Of course, Chen Qiqi was dissatisfied. But no matter how dissatisfied she was, it was useless. Her father, who had always doted on her, shut his mouth. And her brother didn't say anything at all. Chen Biyue even said, "This is the best future I can give you. Chen Qiqi, don't forget that what you want is my life." Chen Qiqi looked at her brother's cold side profile and suddenly understood. The sibling relationship between her and him had been broken after what she had done. She didn't say anything more. She packed her things and chose to leave. She completely understood that if she didn't leave, what awaited her wouldn't be a good place. Chen Biyue listened to his subordinate's report that Chen Qiqi had successfully arrived at the place he had arranged. He told old Master Chen. He said in a low voice, "If you can't bear to part with her, you can visit her in the future." Even so, he didn't mention anything about changing his mind. However, old Master Chen shook his head and said, "No, it's better for her to bear the consequences of her own mistakes. Let her come back and kowtow to me when I'm 100 years old." Chen Biyue was silent. Spend the rest of her life in luxury? Gu Shengyin silently watched the Chen family's handling of the matter. She could understand. After all, Chen Qiqi was the Chen family's blood relative. It would be unreasonable if she really used any extreme means. However, Old Master Chen and Chen Biyue were Chen Qiqi's blood relatives, so she could be forgiven for anything. Gu Shengyin wasn't, and neither was Dean. On the first night of Chen Qiqi's new home, she couldn't sleep because of the cold. The next day, she went to the doctor in a mess and told them what had happened to her, but no one believed her, because there was nothing wrong with the test results. The news spread to the Chen family on the other side of the ocean. Even Old Master Chen only thought that his daughter was playing tricks to come back. For the first time, Chen Qiqi experienced what it was like to have no one to turn to for help. However, this was just the beginning. From that night onwards, every night from midnight onwards, she would fall into that terrible feeling. She seemed to see her naked body surrounded by ice shackles. The piercing cold seeped into her limbs and bones, freezing her flesh and freezing her cells to death. The numbness and dull pains slowly eroded her body. When she woke up the next morning, Chen Qiqi even thought that she was dead. She went to the hospital like a madwoman, but the result was the same. Later, she stopped going to the hospital and went to the nearby church to pray, asking the priest to save her. However, it was useless. Every night, she felt like she would experience death. In just a short span of 10 days, Chen Qiqi woke up numbly one morning and was shocked to find that her hair had turned white. The woman in the mirror had a numb expression, lifeless eyes, and pale skin. She looked like a woman in her 30s. Was that really her? Chen Qiqi felt like she was going crazy. Gu Shengyin just looked on coldly. Since he had such thoughts, he had to be prepared to bear the consequences. Otherwise, how would Chen Qiqi know how those who died by her hands felt when they died? This was a verdant valley. Chen Biyue was wearing simple casual clothes, looking at the dense forest in a daze. He had asked a lot of people about it, and with his amazing intuition, he finally found this place. Would she really be here? Chapter 1725. Chen Biyue walked through the forest. Gu Shengyin, who had never paid special attention to non-mission targets, did not notice that someone had found this place. She was sitting on the grass in front of the small wooden house, with a piece of cloth spread out in front of her. On it was the broken puppet doll. Gu Shengyin was a little distressed. With the puppet doll in this state, it seemed that there was only one way left, to refine it again. Anyway, this doll had no consciousness of its own. Gu Shengyin was still a little sad when she thought of this. She really liked the doll that liked to stick to her. No wonder she felt that the doll was very smart. It turned out that it was not a consciousness condensed by a normal Yin spirit at all. It was originally a normal human being. How could a human who once had normal thinking not be smart? Gu Shengyin was lost in her thoughts when her expressions suddenly changed. Someone was coming? When Chen Biyue walked here, he saw two very unique buildings among the trees and flowers at a glance. One was a small wooden house. The structure of the small wooden house was similar to a normal house, but the outside was plated with a layer of red material. A completely red house was placed in the middle of a mountain forest where few people would go. The other building was even stranger. From Chen Biyue's experience, it looked very much like the tent-like buildings commonly used by nomads. This building was completely opposite to the wooden house on the side. Every part of it was silver white. The color and brightness of the building were as if the outer layer was plated with a layer of silver. He did not see anyone. But Chen Biyue knew that he was not in the wrong place. He could not suppress the excitement in his heart and continued to walk forward. He wanted to see the master who was said to have saved his life. He wanted to figure out why he was so obsessed with her. Before he got close to the house, he was suddenly blocked by a person who suddenly appeared from the grass. There was someone else here? Chen Biyue was about to speak when he took a closer look and realized that the person in front of him was not a real person at all. She had the height of an ordinary person, and her appearance was lifelike. If he did not look carefully, he really could not tell that she was not a real person. However, if one were to take a closer look, one would be able to tell that no matter how lifelike the puppet was, it was still lacking in agility compared to a real person. Their eyes would never focus, and their expressions would never change. That is, unless their master gave them special instructions. Strangers are forbidden from approaching. The puppet suddenly spoke. His tone was a little stiff, as if something was grinding on a piece of wood, without the slightest hint of emotion. Chen Biue was surprised and cooperatively took 2 steps back. I'm Chen Biue. I'm here to thank Master Dian for saving my life. No one responded to him. Chen Biue didn't give up. He continued to shout, I'm Chen Biue. I'm here to thank Master Dean for saving my life. Gu Xingyin was listening in the room. Just as she was about to ask them to leave, she suddenly paused. She looked in the direction of the sound. There was a thick wall blocking her view, but at that moment, her gaze seemed to penetrate all obstacles and landed on the person outside the house. Gu Xingyin raised his eyebrows in surprise when he saw it. It's actually him? Chapter 1726. After Chen Biue shouted the second time, he was about to shout the third time. He saw that the red wooden hut on the left had opened by itself. A black figure appeared at the door. Chen Biue looked over subconsciously and was suddenly stunned. Countless memories flooded into his mind and drowned him. From the moment he opened his mouth to the end, Gu Xingyin saw that the man was just staring at her blankly. She couldn't help but smile. Oh? How do you want to repay me? Chen Biue came back to his senses because of this sentence. He walked towards the wooden hut step by step. This time, the puppet didn't stop him. His face was calm, but his heart was beating fast. 1 step, 2 steps, 3 steps. He walked until he was in front of Gu Xingyin. Gu Xingyin also didn't expect that the person she wanted to save to complete the task would be her lover. Chen Biue had already walked to Gu Xingyin. But he didn't stop. Instead, he continued to take a step forward. His whole body was in contact with Gu Xingyin's body. Then, he reached out and hugged her in his arms. How about I give myself to you? When Chen Biue said this, he was actually prepared to be rejected. He knew that his behavior was a little rash. But the moment his memory was suddenly restored, he couldn't suppress the desire that spread from the bottom of his heart. He was willing to follow his heart. However, Gu Xingyin didn't push him away. A minute later, Chen Biue, who realized this, was ecstatic. He tightened his arms until Gu Xingyin complained that he was too tight and made her uncomfortable. Let go. My arm hurts. Chen Biue smiled and loosened some of his strength. But he didn't listen to Gu Xingyin's words and let go of his arms. I'm so happy, Dean. I'm so happy. I thought you would refuse. Gu Xingyin looked up at his silly face and said with disdain, Speak properly, or I will doubt my taste. Chen Biue immediately straightened his posture. His expression returned to its usual calmness, but there was a satisfied smile on his face. It could be said to be one of the proudest things in life when the person you like also likes you. He spent several months with Gu Xingyin in the forest and knew that the Chen family in the capital kept urging him to go back. Are you willing to accompany me to the capital? Chen Biue asked. Gu Xingyin shook her head without hesitation. Dean was not suitable to stay in a big city with a lot of people. She was born in this forest and grew up in this forest. Her future also belonged to this forest. Chen Biue didn't seem surprised by this result. He stayed with Gu Xingyin for a few more days. Then one day he said goodbye to Gu Xingyin. Dian, I have some matters to attend to and need to return to the capital for a while. He did not hide it from her. He was the heir of the Qin family, and he had a burden that he couldn't get rid of. Gu Xingyin understood very well. A man would always have things that he couldn't give up, such as responsibilities and career. She liked him, so she couldn't restrain him in the name of so-called love. But, 5 years. This is the time I give you. She looked at Chen Biue. After 5 years, you don't have to come here again. A woman was willing to support her lover for love. But she shouldn't sacrifice her whole life for the so-called love. Chen Biue looked at Gu Xingyin for a long time and nodded. Chapter 1727. Chen Biue left. There was no sadness in their parting. Gu Shengyin sent Chenbiyue out of the valley as if he was an old friend. After that, she deliberately did not allow the system to pay attention to Chenbiyue's news. She lived her life alone as usual. Occasionally, she would accept one or two people's requests and use her identity as a puppet master to do something for them. However, this time, not only did Gu Shengyin act according to his mood, he would also decide whether to help the person based on their request. A year later, her reputation was growing in a certain circle. Compared to her previous reputation of being evil and ruthless, it was much better. She refined the puppet doll again. The new puppet doll looked exactly the same as the previous one. Gu Shengyin also gathered countless Yin spirits and dripped her blood on it. However, this puppet doll didn't have its own consciousness like the previous one. It was just an ordinary puppet. At most, it was slightly more powerful than the other puppets. After that, another year passed. One day, Gu Shengyin woke up and saw the puppet doll sitting up on its own without her command. When it saw Gu Shengyin, it did not even know how to walk. Instead, it used all four of its limbs to crawl towards her. Its eyes were full of admiration. Gu Shengyin was caught off guard by this surprise. She had given the puppet doll the name Jiujio. She had hoped that it would accompany her forever. Another year passed. Chen Qiqi, who was far away on the other side of the ocean, finally could not bear the price of living in this world. One day, she wore her favorite dress and put on her most exquisite makeup. Then she walked to a bridge in a foreign city and jumped off. She died on the spot. When Gu Shengyin heard this news, she did not think much of it. Didn't Chen Qiqi know that people who died in this way, no matter how beautifully they dressed up, would only see a bloody mess in the end? No matter what, Chen Qiqi's death meant that Gu Shengyin's mission was completed. When the deciduous trees in the valley sprouted new buds again, Gu Shengyin, who was collecting all kinds of materials in the forest, suddenly felt something. She straightened up and asked the system, "Is he here?" The system replied, "Yes, host." Gu Shengyin reached out her hand to cover her heart. She thought that after experiencing so many worlds, she was able to face anything with a heart as calm as still water. But when they heard the news, they jumped very quickly. In the end, she still couldn't transcend. After summoning the white tiger, Gu Shengyin headed towards her residence. From afar, she saw the man standing in front of her wooden house. It was exactly the same as when he stood in front of the wooden house 3 years ago. Hearing the tiger's roar, Chenbiyue turned around. He looked at the cold and beautiful black-robed woman on the white tiger's back and smiled. Then, he reached out his arm and caught the body that jumped into his arms. He hugged her tightly, as if he had filled all the emptiness in the past 3 years. "I'm just a jobless person now. Dean has to take care of me," he said with a light smile. Gu Shengyin raised her eyebrows. "Okay, serve me well and I'll take care of you for a lifetime." Their fingers intertwined together for a lifetime. Chapter 1728. As a puppeteer, Dean's lifespan was much longer than Chenbiyue's. After Chenbiyue left, Gu Shengyin buried him in a place with beautiful scenery. Then, he made a grave for himself beside Chenbiyue and laid in it. The last order she gave to White Tiger and Jiujio was to fill up the hole in her coffin. When she left this world, Gu Shengyin seemed to hear dolls crying and White Tiger's mournful whimper. "Sorry, my partners." She closed her eyes and her consciousness fell into a deep sleep. "Even without me, you can still live well in this world for a very, very long time." When she opened her eyes again, she was already in space. Proceed to the next quest. Gu Shengyin did not even bother to rest as she directly said. "Yes, host," the system replied. When Gu Shengyin opened her eyes, she found that she was sitting inside a big bus. There were 5 other people in the same bus as her, 3 men and 2 women. Gu Shengyin did not say anything as she directly received the storyline of this world. After receiving the storyline, Gu Shengyin could only say that the guts of these 6 people were really big. The 6 people on the 2 buses, including Gu Shengyin, did not know each other until a day ago. They were 6 adventurers from different places. This time, they had gathered together to explore a ghost castle deep in the mountains. Gu Shengyin ridiculed. This was completely the plot of a horror novel. If she did not read the storyline, she would have guessed that the 6 of them would encounter a series of bizarre and supernatural events in that ancient castle. If the story was more bloody, only 1 or 2 of the 6 people would survive. After reading the storyline, it was confirmed that Gu Xingyin's ridicule was completely correct. The storyline of this world really was such a terrifying plot. Gu Xingyin's body was called Leng Shi. After her parents died, they left her with an endless amount of property. Her hobbies were martial arts, adventure, and travel. Leng Shi, who was 25 years old, had once won the provincial Sanda competition. She could be considered the most powerful person in this group of people. As for the other 5 people, one of them was a couple. They were ordinary white-collar workers and adventurers. This time, they took advantage of the New Year holiday to look for excitement. The remaining girl, Qin Qingqing, was the target of this world's mission. She was a university student. The other 2 men were a horror novel author and a reporter. According to him, he wanted to write a column about the exploration of the ghost castle when he went back this time. Unfortunately, he was unable to return. Gu Xingyin looked at the 5 people and sighed in her heart. He really didn't know what these people were thinking. They knew that a lot of accidents had happened in Ghost Castle, but they still wanted to come out and get themselves killed. In the original plot, other than the supporting female lead, Qin Qingqing, the other 5 would remain in the movie forever. Qin Qingqing's outcome was not much better. She had gone crazy. Because she was scared out of her wits, she couldn't sense the outside world. Those ghosts couldn't affect her, so she was spared. Speaking of courting death, this Qin Qingqing was the one who courted death the most out of all of them. Originally, when the 6 of them first entered the castle, they had a chance to leave. There were already people who wanted to retreat, but all of them changed their minds after Qin Qingqing's provocation, ridicule, and encouragement. If she didn't know the storyline, Gu Xingyin would really think that this Qin Qingqing was a spy sent by Ghost Castle. Chapter 1729. Why did Qin Qingqing say that? Because at the beginning of the plot, when everyone had just entered the ancient castle, that ancient castle had an owner. The owner of the ancient castle did not welcome these outsiders at all. This group of adventurers had received a warning from the beginning. At that time, the white-collar couple was scared and wanted to retreat. However, Qin Qingqing dissuaded them, saying that adventures were more interesting when they were scary. The white-collar couple felt that it would be embarrassing if they could not even compare to a little girl. Thus, they gritted their teeth and continued. From the moment they entered the ancient castle, the 6 of them began to experience all kinds of bizarre events. For example, the ancient castle that had not been entered for many years was indeed clean and spotless. For example, there were 6 sets of tableware neatly arranged in the dining room. When the covered bowls were opened, there were bloody hands inside. At that time, even horror novel enthusiasts wanted to give up. However, Qin Qingqing still stopped him. She was also very scared, but she felt more excited. She even comforted everyone, saying that someone must have known in advance that they were going to explore and played a prank on them. Those hands were definitely fake props. No one dared to verify the authenticity of those hands. Under such circumstances, Qin Qingqing, who appeared to be very calm, actually managed to fool a large group of people just like that. In the afternoon, when the sky was about to turn dark, everyone heard the sound of many people moving around on the roof. Leng Shi finally made the decision to leave. When they went upstairs earlier, they were very sure that there was no one inside. The only way to go upstairs was to go to the hall where everyone was waiting. However, just as she was about to leave, the castle's old gate slowly closed in front of everyone. The whole world was pitch black. An evil voice rang in their ears, "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the ancient castle's carnival." After that, it was a bloody journey. Gu Xingyin calmly finished watching and said to the system calmly, "If I ask the driver to stop now, can I?" The system replied with a white flash, "Host, unless you voluntarily request to leave this world and give up the mission, no matter what excuse you use, the 6 of you will enter the ghost castle according to the plot development." Gu Xingyin, as a qualified mission enforcer, voluntarily giving up the mission was definitely not her style. Isn't it just a ghost castle? Gu Xingyin took a deep breath and said, "Okay, I'll continue." The system spoke again. Due to the uniqueness of the plot this time, the host's mission has changed slightly. Gu Xingyin's eyes lit up. The system said, "The ghost castle opens the gate of life once every 10 days. The host's mission is to survive these 10 days. Gu Xingyin swallowed with difficulty. After all, I'm a human, and the other party is a ghost. Besides, I don't have to care about the others, right? The system replied, "As for the others, if the host can save one more person's life after the mission is over, the host will enjoy more gifts from the world." Gu Xingyin instantly understood. What he meant was that he didn't want to force her, but he hoped that she could save the lives of her companions. As if sensing Gu Xingyin's anxiety, the system said, "Due to the special nature of this mission, in addition to the ability to draw a skill, the system will also give the host 3 one-time gift packs to help the host complete the mission." Chapter 1730. Gu Xingyin's eyes lit up when she heard this. The system never said useless things. That meant that if it said it would give something, it would definitely be something that would be extremely beneficial to the mission. She said, "Draw skill." System, "Ding, congratulations to the host, you have obtained the Psychic Beast, Psychic Eye, skill." Gu Xingyin. She had a feeling that although this skill sounded very useful, it made her feel even more scared. She couldn't help but ask, "What is the use of this Psychic Eye skill?" The system replied, "For this world, this skill is very useful. That means that the host can see the 3 realms and understand the yin and yang. Any ghost's disguise or illusion will not be able to cause any threat to the host." In other words, Gu Xingyin could see all the living things in the ghost castle. This knowledge made Gu Xingyin shiver uncontrollably. Just as the system said, this was a very useful skill. After all, most of the time, ghosts were best at creating illusions that were several times scarier than themselves to confuse others. But at the same time, this also meant that Gu Xingyin would have to face all the ghosts directly. Gu Xingyin finally understood why she was so scared. She never thought that there was anything in this world that she was afraid of, until she received this mission. In fact, Gu Xingyin himself didn't know why he was like this when he heard about the ghost castle. He was able to cut down zombies without batting an eyelid. She was just afraid. Gu Xingyin, who treated the system as a good partner, didn't hesitate to tell her partner, "System, I think I'm afraid of ghosts." System, it comforted Gu Xing, "Don't be afraid, host. I will give you 3 big gift packages." Gu Xingyin's heart was filled with hope. Then, "Ding host, please check. Guanin's Soul Suppressing Palace has 5 cards. Effect, each card lasts for 24 hours. No ghosts can get close. Ding host, please check. Received the ability to remain calm in front of ghosts and monsters. Ding host, please check. Received a dagger that can harm ghosts." Gu Xingyin silently looked at the 3 skills. She could understand the first and the third one. One was used to save her life, and the other was used to counterattack. Both were good things. But what the hell was the second one? The system explained, "The second skill means that no matter how terrifying the supernatural phenomenon is in front of the host will be able to remain calm. No matter how scared the host is, the host's aura will not lose." Gu Xingyin, wasn't he just trying to save face? She sighed, opened her eyes, and began to look at the people in the car. He put his hand into his pocket and felt a few pieces of paper and a hard object that was a little hard to grip. This was the big gift from the system. Gu Xingyin looked over and saw a couple leaning against each other sitting diagonally to her left. They seemed to be the white-collar couple. Opposite him was a young girl with headphones plugged into her ears. She was holding a pink Hello Kitty case in her hand and seemed to be playing games. As if sensing Gu Xingyin's gaze, the girl raised her head and smiled at her. This was Qin Qingqing. On Gu Xingyin's right, a fashionably dressed man in black was fiddling with his camera. When he saw Gu Xingyin, he raised his hand and took a picture of her. He even smiled at Gu Xingyin with a very friendly expression. Chapter 1731. This reporter was called Zhang Chao. He was the most popular person in the group. Reporters generally had high EQ. Zhang Chao was a straightforward person and had a good relationship with everyone. Of course, he liked to chat with Gu Shengyin the most. The best thing was to take a few photos of her. According to Zhang Chao, Leng Shi was born to be a model. She had good looks and a good figure. A few photos he took were the kind that could be on the cover of a magazine. On the left of Gu Shengyin, there was a man with glasses sitting in the corner, keeping a certain distance from everyone. He was the horror novel author, Qinggu. Qinggu was his pen name. As for his real name, Qinggu didn't reveal it. Everyone had met by chance, so naturally he wouldn't deliberately ask. Gu Shengyin thought for a while and said, "Did you bring enough food in your backpack? I'm afraid that if there's an accident, it'll be hard to say if there's not enough food." She herself only brought enough food for a week. The reporter was the first to speak with a smile. "I travel a lot, so I'm very experienced in this kind of thing. Don't worry, I brought a lot of compressed food. It's definitely enough." The horror novel author, Qinggu, also said slowly, "My food can probably last for a few days." Qin Qingqing opened her backpack for everyone to see. Gu Shengyin was speechless when she saw a lot of book reviews, chocolates, spicy sticks, and the like. This girl, did she really think that she was here for a vacation? The white-collar couple also looked. The man said, "The two of us brought about 3 days' worth of food." Gu Shengyin frowned. In other words, this time, the 6 people, except for the reporter, didn't bring enough food. In a place like Ghost Castle, not to mention whether there was food inside, even if there was, she didn't dare to touch it. Looking outside, Gu Shengyin noticed that this was already the suburbs. There were almost no convenience stores or people. She walked to the front and asked the driver, "Brother, I want to ask, how long until we reach Ghost Castle? Will there be any shops on this road?" The driver was a middle-aged man in his 30s. They had spent a lot of money to hire him, but even so, the driver only dared to take them a few kilometers away from the Ghost Castle. According to the driver, that place was very creepy and he didn't dare to go near it. When they heard this, they were naturally even more excited. The driver opened his mouth and said, "About 2 more hours? There won't be any shops here. Let me think, there's a small village about 10 minutes ahead. I wonder if there'll be." "I say, sister, there are so many fun places in the city. Why don't you go there? Why do you have to come to a place like this? Listen to Big Brother's advice and go back." He had already said this several times, but none of them took it seriously. Gu Shengyin thought, "I want to go back too, but the plot won't let me." She made a prompt decision and said, "Then I'll have to trouble you to send us to that village first. I'll give you more money then." The driver waved his hand. "That's not a problem. I'll drive you there." Gu Shengyin thanked him and returned to the car. She looked at the others and said, "We'll pass by a village later. Put down some unimportant things and pack more food." Qin Qingqing was unhappy after she said this. "What? It's just an adventure game. You're making it sound like an escape game. Other than food, there's only a game console in my bag. My snacks are enough to eat for a few days." Chapter 1732. Gu Shengyin looked at Qin Qingqing. Gu Shengyin, who had read the plot, knew that Qin Qingqing was the only daughter of a relatively wealthy family. Perhaps it was in such a family that she developed such a personality. She was not afraid of anything and felt that everything would develop as she expected. Actually, it could be called ego. Those who thought differently from her were all wrong. The novelist and the reporter did not speak. The girl in the white-collar couple also said, "Is there a need to be so serious? We've all brought food for a few days. It should be enough, right?" She also disagreed. This woman, who had been in the workplace for several years, was obviously much nicer than Qin Qingqing. Leng Shi's persona was not a warm-hearted big sister, but a straightforward young lady. She said, "I'm just reminding everyone that no one knows what the situation in the Ghost Castle is like. In the face of an unknown situation, being fully prepared is our biggest guarantee. Anyway, I've already reminded you. It's up to you whether you want to listen or not." Her almond-shaped eyes swept across everyone in the car. "I've already asked the driver to take us to the village. Whether you need supplies or not, You can decide for yourselves. But there's one thing that I want to say first. If, and I'm saying if, there's really an emergency and there's not enough food, please don't blame others for being selfish and not helping her. After saying this, she closed her eyes to rest, not paying attention to the different expressions on everyone's faces. Everyone was a little confused by her words. After all, they were all strangers who had just met. There was a layer between them when they spoke and did things. No matter how they were usually, they were all amiable on the surface. This was the first time they had seen Lung Shi speak in such a serious tone. Qin Qingqing's expression was a little ugly. She had a feeling that Gu Xingyin was targeting her. The reporter's expression was a little serious. He was good at reading people's expressions and had a good eye for people. From the beginning, he knew that the most reliable person in this group was probably Lung Shi, the hot and sexy beauty. He thought that he could still see through Lung Shi, but from the beginning, Zhang Chao felt that he could not see through this woman in front of him. His reporter's intuition had helped him through many crises. So this time, he made a decision to follow Lung Shi. The horror novelist, Qin Gu, looked at Gu Xingyin a few times before lowering his head. Although Gu Xingyin's words were not pleasant to hear, she was right. There was nothing wrong with making ample preparations. The couple seemed to be discussing something in a low voice. Soon, they arrived at the village. The small village looked very clean and tidy. No one was surprised to see strange cars coming in. Gu Xingyin was the first to get out of the car with her huge backpack. She looked at an auntie who was basking in the sun with her eyes squinted and asked, "Auntie, I would like to ask if you have a shop here?" The auntie lazily raised her head and said, "Go to the right, the third house." She was actually speaking Mandarin with perfect pronunciation. Gu Xingyin was delighted. "Thank you, auntie." She walked towards the direction the auntie was pointing at. Behind her, Zhang Chao also got out of the car. The couple seemed to hesitate for a moment, and the man also came down with his bag. Only Qin Qingqing and the woman were left. Girls probably followed the crowd. The other girl also said to Qin Qingqing, "Qingqing, why don't you go and buy something too?" Chapter 1733. When Qin Qingqing saw that everyone had left, she was actually a little shaken. Hearing this woman's words, she hesitated for a moment before getting out of the car. The convenience store in this small village wasn't big, but it was enough for these people. Gu Xingyin looked at the things on the shelves and chose some easier to carry into her bag: energy drinks, purified water, chocolate, sugar, bread. They were all things that could maintain her body's energy and fill her stomach. She originally had some compressed food in her bag, which Gu Xingyin had kept. She glanced around and saw that there were a few books, an imported stereo, and a bunch of useless but expensive things in the bag. Gu Xingyin took them all out and threw them away. Seeing her like this, the few people who didn't think much of it all started to take it seriously. The moment Qin Qingqing entered, she saw Gu Xingyin throw her stereo on the ground. She exclaimed, "This is a stereo. It costs tens of thousands of yuan? You just threw it away like this? If you don't want it, you can give it to me." Gu Xingyin simply said, "If I were you, I'd think about how to fill my backpack with as many useful things as possible at this time. This stereo isn't of much use in that kind of place." She looked at the few of them and suddenly said, "If you're willing to believe me, prepare food for more than 10 days, everyone." After she said this, there was a sudden clap of thunder in the sky. At this time, it was a sunny day outside with no clouds in the clear sky. The sudden clap of thunder gave everyone a shock. They felt that this clap of thunder was really strange. It came so suddenly, as if it was warning someone. Everyone thought of Gu Xingyin's words just now and suddenly felt a chill in their hearts. Gu Xingyin's lips curled up into a smile. She knew that this was the law of the world detecting that someone suddenly made a sound and disrupted the rules, but it couldn't find the person behind the scenes, so it could only use this clap of thunder as a warning. The law of the world was no longer the one that could casually expel her from the world. No, it should be said that Gu Xingyin was no longer the Gu Xingyin who would be easily detected and rejected by the laws of the world. She tried to make another effort and said after some deliberation, "You might not believe me, but I used to learn some things from an old Taoist, such as divination. Our adventure this time is not very optimistic. If there's anyone willing to back out, it's still not too late." Before she could finish her sentence, a series of thunderous booms came from outside. Gu Shengyin smiled helplessly. Everyone covered their ears and waited for the thunder to pass. Gu Shengyin shrugged. "Do you see that? This is the so-called secret of heaven that cannot be revealed." As she spoke, she took another bag of bread and put it in her bag. At this time, the way they looked at Gu Shengyin was very different from before. But at this time, they didn't realize what the so-called not optimistic meant. Qin Qingqing even looked at Gu Shengyin excitedly and said, "Leng Shi, you're really too amazing. This is really too amazing. Right now, I'm extremely curious about our upcoming journey." Gu Shengyin glanced around and found that not only Qin Qingqing, but everyone's faces were filled with excitement and eagerness to try. She sighed in her heart. Indeed, even if she wanted to change something, she still had to experience what she had to experience. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.